to find fentanyl than baby formula. I asked around. Everyone agreed with them. Now, yes, they cut the fentanyl with baby formula, but also there's just no baby formula there. We've created an impoverished region where it's much easier to go down to the corner, from this church, by the way, and find fentanyl affordable, easy, and simply acquired because we are funding the salesmen, the cartels, who are running human trafficking operations across a porous border, which we're allowing, and by allowing their profits to be reinvested from human trafficking to buying fentanyl from China, we're now actively embracing a supplier of a toxic substance. We confiscated enough fentanyl last month to kill every person in America. And the state troopers just told me they confiscated last quarter 7 times more fentanyl than they did in 2020. 7 times increase. All of it because we're aiding and abetting inadvertently cartels, which are really terrorist organizations bringing narcotics here. Now, all while this is happening, my opponent, John Fetterman, has argued that we should decriminalize all drugs and create heroin injection sites. I went to a heroin injection site in Philadelphia, did an event there to point out that no one wants it in their backyard because it brings crime, and giving people the ability to take heroin long-term is not a survival strategy. You're not going to do well taking heroin long-term. So these ideas don't make sense, in my opinion. But let's move from my opinion to proof. When Oregon passed Measure 110 2 years ago, John Fetterman tweeted out strong support for it. Let's look at what happened. In Oregon, there was a 40% increase over the last year and a half in deaths from drug overdose, mostly fentanyl, 40%. Now, you think that's bad, but let me just stun you with something more important. 50% increase in homicide rates. I'll say it again. You legalize drugs, all drugs, including narcotics, you have a 50% increase in homicide rates, at least in Oregon. Now, why is that? Because you don't let police do their work. They can't confiscate the drug. They can't arrest people for having narcotics. And so those people tend to do other bad things. Or they start fighting with each other on the turf wars, and you end up with increased homicides with innocent civilians caught in the middle. We can do better. Second big theme today, besides the drug overdose problems that we're allowing and with the associated crime, is the actual crime itself. And I have been harsh on this topic because I'm speaking for many who can't speak for themselves. Many folks inside, certainly the big cities, tell me they feel like they're part of a social experiment where people, and this is their words, white woke people make rules and they're stuck with the problem. And if you look at it objectively, it doesn't seem too far from the truth. Again, it's not done on purpose, but the result is unsafe communities because we're doing an experiment and we're not willing to look harshly at that data, at what's really happening. If you take policies that don't work and you don't course correct them, everyone suffers. As a doctor, if I prescribe you a pill for a problem and it doesn't get better, I need to change what I'm doing. I can't blame you. And that's why I'm calling for a more thoughtful approach to law enforcement. Now, John Fetterman, when he says he wants to release 1/3 of all prisoners, it wouldn't make anyone less safe, that's an experiment. That hasn't been tried before. I'd rather not do it all at once, and certainly right now is not a good time with the middle of the crime spree we're in. The violence rates through the roof. And carjacking, we just had our 1,000th carjacking last month. 1,000 carjackings because people get away with it. And they go on to do other bad crimes after they do get away with it. But even more concerning to me is this obsession with releasing murderers who have been convicted by a jury of peers, sentenced to life in prison, and John Fetterman thinks he knows better. Dozens of times he's voted to release these inmates. Several dozen times he was voting against the other parole board members. In almost all cases, voting against the desires of the family. Maureen Faulkner joined me last night at the debate backstage and was sharing the story of Danny, her husband, a Philadelphia police officer who was brutally gunned down. She doesn't want the murderers released, yet people like Maureen are suffering continually every day and not being consulted about what these decisions are going to mean in their communities. And just this past week, you may have seen the headlines around it, the so-called Conviction Integrity Unit. When the Conviction Integrity Unit sounds like an Orwellian term, it was something that was created by Krasner, who's in a little bit of trouble right now, I'm seeing on television as I walked in here, with articles of impeachment, I think, being dropped. But this Conviction Integrity Unit had freed a murderer. His name I wrote down, Jameer Harris. Now, in 2012, Jameer Harris walked up to a man with his 5-year-old son in the back seat and shot him in the head and walked away. They caught him. He was convicted. He went to jail. This Conviction Integrity Unit goes back and reevaluates whether the prosecution did a good job. They decided they were going to drop the charges. The judge did not want to drop the charges. The family knows he killed their loved one. No one thought this guy was innocent, from what I can tell. I only know what you're all reading. Yet this man went free in March. And he was free until Saturday. Because in September, he murdered another man. Very similar approach. Walked up to him, cased him out, walked back. 2 people came with him. They shot the man to death. And he was on the run. And he finally was apprehended. But interestingly, John Fetterman, all this time, has been advocating for the Conviction Integrity Unit. I'm going to quote him because this week he did an interview, just this week, saying that it was a groundbreaking approach. It was a beacon for the future. It should be, quote unquote, mandatory in all 67 counties. And because it's not, he decided to turn the parole board into the equivalent of the Conviction Integrity Unit. An approach that seems to give more credibility and seems to care more about the criminals than it does about the innocent, the people who are hurt in these endeavors. Now, when I read this in the different outlined documents that I'm given every single day, I look with it, and I'm incredulous that this is happening in a vacuum. I just don't get it. I don't understand why this continues over and over again. And every time I open up a new document, I see something new. I just read that he had voted to release a man who stabbed his girlfriend's mother to death with scissors, and then wanted the man released because he had learned yoga in prison and had done a horticultural degree. These are wonderful things, and I'm glad those were all done. It doesn't mean that you're rehabilitated from first-degree murder, which sometimes involves deeper psychological issues that make you dangerous. So I vow here and now that as a U.S. Senator, I'll do the right thing for our communities. Amongst them, I'm going to let police do their jobs. Just do your job. I want our prosecutors to do their jobs. I don't want to have public defenders complaining that there's no one against them in court and they're being forced to defend people they know are guilty and are dangerous to society, and they shouldn't be let go. So if the public defenders doing their job, prosecutors must do their jobs. And political leaders must do their jobs as well, which means you interrogate what you're saying, you look at the results of your programs. If you've created a Kensington event, the largest open-air drug market in the country with lax laws on drugs, you better deal with it. If you created mayhem in the city of Philadelphia with the highest murder rate ever last year, ever. I went to school in West Philly. I could walk around, bike around. It was never a problem. Families will not leave their homes. They're buying video games so their kids can stay safe, which is not the healthiest thing for a child, but it's better than walking on the street where they may get shot. I think Philadelphia deserves better than Krasner, and Pennsylvania deserves better than Fetterman. God bless you all. Thank you.